Hello, my friends, Korina's Academy here, and today we're going to have a very inspired conversation with a great guest, a very special guest, Frank Jacob. He is the first man who ever wrote something about the guardians of the looking glass, and since then, this subject became viral. So he's going to talk to us about the guardians of looking glass. Are they real or not? What he thinks about it. And also he will tell us how he thinks that we can achieve the optimal timeline, how humanity can be saved. And also, at the end of the interview, he explains how he will make a webinar. I'm really looking forward for that. And you can have his email address and contact him if you want to join his webinar. So let's go for it. Let's see Frank Jacob. Okay, hello, Frank. I'm very happy that we have you here with us today.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. And I have to say to my audience that Frank is a very special guest because he is international award-winning filmmaker, musician, composer, creative designer, and the list goes on, I think, right? And the very special about you for me is that I saw your two movies for now, the Fighting for Mars and the Solar Revolution.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I loved that. And it's the special about you is that you are a wonderful person who wants to find the truth and to give it out, and you're courageous, and I love that about you. And I love that you're working now at the Guardians of the Looking Glass project. So maybe we can talk a bit about that. And I have millions of questions. So, yes.
We probably won't be able to get to all a million, but we can start.
Yes. And I was wondering also how you started. I mean, when you were a kid, you had out-of-body experiences, maybe, because usually people who are like that, they have some metaphysical experience, right?
Actually, no. I never really had any out-of-bodies or anything like that. I've always been kind of a deep thinker. You know, I probably overthought things when I was a kid, and that's why at an early age I already started to dive into spiritual-oriented reading material. Of course, back then there weren't really any cool movies out. That's all still, you know, that was not happening back then. But there were great books out and music, of course. You know, so for me, you know, that music was sort of the love of my life and arts, and I knew that I also liked filmmaking because I took a course in high school on how to make films. And so I just knew that, I just think because I started so early reading books about, like extrasensory abilities, or, you know, the Carlos Castaneda books, that there was this, you know, there was this master teaching, you know, and then they would go into these psychotropic, like, bizarre experiences. And that, I mean, for a young kid, that was like, you know, your imagination just, you know, I didn't do the peyote. I had to just use my imagination. So I think, you know, that's kind of where it emerged. And just, you know, knowing that the world was kind of a dangerous place, you know, when you find out as a kid that there were people, like hundreds of thousands of people that were bombed, you know, with nuclear bombs, for no reason at all, really, and you just realize, oh my God! And if you're sensitive, like I was, I realized it was just the world not to be trusted. So I think that's kind of what sent me off more than anything else, more than any kind of out-of-body experience. Or I didn't even know what that was. I think when I was a kid, I learned, of course, many years later what that is, and near-death experiences included. But yeah, so it's maybe not as exciting as a start that you were hoping for.
No, it's great, it's great. And maybe you had that experience, but you didn't know that it is that, because I think a lot of kids have it, but they don't know what it is, you know, so yeah.
I got kicked in the head really hard once when I was, I think, 14 years old, and I had birds, you know, chirping and stuff like that. So Who knows? Maybe that was part of it. You know, just like in the cartoons when that happens, you know, that you hear you see the stars whirling around and they hear the birds chirping, and it was like just like that.
Yeah. Okay. So, Frank, what is the difference of the machine of the looking glass and the difference of chronovisor? Is the same thing, or they are two different machines? Because I know the chronovisor has been made in Vatican, right? But usually people talk about, when they talk about the looking glass, they talk about the chronovisor. So there is a difference. There are different machines.
Yes, they're totally different technology. The chronovisor is a man-made technology, and it was invented by Pellegrino Ornetti, who was in the Vatican. He was a physicist in the Vatican, also a priest, and he developed it many, many years before the looking glass ever came into possession of the the United States. So at that point, there was no looking glass. There was just this inventor's concept of the way the chronovisor works is it is able to tune in remnant frequencies that are left over and stored in the magnetosphere that's around the planet. Like if you look at our Earth as a giant living organism, and the magnetosphere, which is our protection from all the cosmic elements from space that are hitting our planet, also acts as a kind of like hard drive. It stores all that resonant data that we as human beings project from our bodies. Okay. And his theory, Pellegrino Ornetti's theory, was that he should be able to pick up sounds that were left over. And he actually was so successful, he found that not only were sounds stored, there were also images, because images have a frequency too. Light has a frequency, and we're light reflectors. So he was able to, using his chronovisor, tune into, like a radio, tune into specific frequencies that displayed these events in time, in the past. And even in the future, apparently, on specific, if the energy was correct, and it had a lot to do with the right energy, because as far as I understood with his machine, not just anybody could operate the machine. You had to be kind of medium to a degree. You had mediumistic talents. You had to have a little bit of sensitivity, which he did. But using the machine, he was able to project into the room these events from the past, and they filmed them, including, the crucifixion of Christ, of course, and, because the Vatican wanted to know about the past. And once they had done this successfully, I think they shocked a lot of the people that were privy to the technology. And so the rumor has it that it disappeared. And later on, the Vatican denied that there was ever any such device. Although there were later also sort of interesting statements that were released by the Vatican years later that said if anyone were to ever play with this device, they would be excommunicated. So, it's funny how on the one hand they denied that the device existed, and on the other hand they said if you play with it, you're going to be excommunicated from the church, right? So strange contradiction there. Yes. But the book that was written about it from Francois Bruno, I think his name was, the foreword of that book was written by a German experimental physicist that we knew from working on a film that we did called Solar Revolution, Ernst Zinkowski, Professor Dr. Ernst Zinkowski. And so I learned most of the information from him about how it worked, but we also filmed a whistleblower for the film Packing for Mars that we did, who had participated in a version of the chronovisor many years later in the 70s. So apparently it didn't disappear. I mean, apparently it was real, and it may have disappeared, but it resurfaced in DARPA and was combined with other technology that Nikola Tesla had been working on, with teleportation and time travel as well, and re-emerged, there under Project Pegasus. And that's where I learned about it for the very first time. And then, when I was back in Germany, I found out that Ernst Zinkowski, who was in Solar Revolution, had actually written the foreword to the only book that is about the chronovisor. So that's why we went and interviewed him about it.
Okay, yes.
Now, the looking glass technology is technology which was, some people believe, extraterrestrial in nature. Anyway, it was given to the Sumerians in the Middle East, and it somehow found its way to Iraq. And it was a set of like sealed canisters or sealed scrolls, as you might call them, that had these instructions on how to build this device in them. And the apparently Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi had a working operating unit. And what's interesting about the looking glass technologies is, yeah, you can build it. It's like a device, but you have to use it only it can only work in specific locations. You can't just put it anywhere. It has to be in specific locations. And these locations are like little micro wormholes, like stargates, as they're called. So, and when it's pushed into proximity of one of these stargates and activated, then it projects a plasma field into the room, which becomes like a crystal ball, for lack of any better description, which then you can actually watch 3D holographic projections of future timelines in. And so it isn't something like you really tune in like the chronovisor. It is something more that you see these timelines and you watch. It's more passive. And the people who operated the device essentially figured out that it plays loops, like it plays a cycle. It goes for 7 days and plays everything right up until the year 2030. And then it starts over again, but it's from a different perspective. Same timeline, different perspective. So you end up with, it does this 144 times, and so you end up with 144 perspectives of a particular timeline. And then it always ends at 2030 and it starts over again. And they began to use computers and cameras. They filmed everything and they documented everything, and they could use the computers to quickly access certain events in certain timelines that they had filmed. And then, of course, began playing with, well, what if, we go into that event and we put one of our agents in and we change it? And that's, so it's a totally different technology altogether. And some people believe it was brought from, like I said, from extraterrestrial sources, but it's hard to verify that, of course.
Yes. Yes. What is strange about that for me is that it shows the same thing. So it shows like limited number of timelines, while we know the butterfly effect. So what if we do another movement in our tomorrow,
Yes.
and what if we have an extra timeline? Why the looking glass shows only a limited number of timelines? This is strange for me.
Well, because there are infinite numbers of timelines that are your individual, perspective. However, we have a consensus timeline. It's that part of the timeline we all overlap with, so that we can, so that we see, certain global events. Like if everyone had their own timeline and they turned on the TV, then every TV would be showing a different news program, but we know that's not the case. So there does seem to be kind of a consensus timeline. And the consensus timeline is made up of, billions, all of our individual perspectives fed into this field, which works out to a kind of probability timeline. Yeah. And that timeline is the one that we sort of perceive in general as society. And that one can, of course, change and be influenced into, there's another thing that comes to it, and that's that there's parallel dimensions. And the parallel dimensions also have timelines, of course. And sometimes these parallel dimensions overlap. And in fact, they've been working on trying to acquire access to parallel dimensions using quantum physics. And when that happens, you can enter into strange, dangerous territory. And some people believe the Mandela effect is one of those things. You've heard of the Mandela effect, I take it, right?
Of course.
It's one of those things that is a proof that there's been bleed through on other parallel dimensions into ours that overlap briefly, and they leave remnants of that other timeline in our consensus timeline.
Yeah.
So you could say that there is generally this main timeline, and you know, that we are collectively as souls have incarnated into to experience the particular lessons that we need to, that we've agreed to before we even maybe incarnated. And the Looking Glass scientists that were working with it, they could, however, see that there was a split-off timeline that came in, that actually a new sort of altogether different timeline that appeared at certain places. And that's, you know, what led them to be kind of in panic. And so that's probably jumping ahead a little bit of your question.
No, it's okay, because this is another question. But you mean about the other guy, the whistleblower, from Project
Bill
Hammer?
Wood.
Yes. He was saying that the timelines merge and the elite is panicked and all that kind of things. And then 10 years after, we have this new information from Guardians of Looking Glass. And I was thinking that at the beginning, oh my God, he was a liar, you know. But then I thought, okay, maybe they say exactly the same thing, because maybe the elite did panic and they created this new injection project, because we can't say the word on YouTube. They created this injection project in order to have change totally the timeline thing and how it goes further. What do you think about that? That he was saying other thing, and you think he was a liar?
Well, the Guardians of the Looking Glass I've actually been in touch with them several times. And their perspective is that he's 50% true and 50% fake. So, you know, that's always something, when you hear that, it's like, okay, which 50% is the true part and which is the fake part? So What you're saying might have some, you know, sense to it. And that they saw one of these timelines emerging. Now, the way Bill Wood described it, you know, and the problem with Bill Wood is, first of all, that's ended up not being his real name. His real name is Bill Brockbrader. And secondly, he was convicted of, you know, sexual relations with an underage woman. So, and then he was court-martialed and he was defamed, and his testimony was changed. So he had to back off of what he said. So that's why many people believe that he was a total fraud. Now, the thing is, he did leave a message to the people, the insiders that he told his story to, saying, I've told you guys the truth. I had to tell this story to the court because it had to be consistent with my court-martial. And so, I had no choice. But what I told you was the truth. And many people believe it. Even to this day, his video is circulating. But I think you just hit on something that I think is really interesting. I think that what his idea was, or his message was, that in 2012, 21st of December, all the timelines would converge into one. There would be a mass awakening, and all the lies would end, and the deep state and the black hats and, you know, all those dark, evil people would basically be destroyed, or would be defeated. Let's say destroyed's a bit hard, but defeated. And we would rise all into this newer level of consciousness. Now, we know that didn't happen. But what is interesting is that, you know, that the timeline that he describes that was supposedly happening on 2012 is what the Guardians of the Looking Glass 10 years later describe as one of the years. There's 3 years, 2012, 2016, and 2022, where a new timeline split off, which would lead to that result of this mass awakening.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So maybe what he was describing was that they saw that there was this timeline that could happen, and they wanted to prevent it from happening. And, you know, they may have hired him and others, string theorists, whatever, to come in and try to make sure that their timeline stays fixed. Because what the Guardians of the Looking Glass said is that, you know, their perspective was that the deep state, working with the Project Looking Glass, was always seeing the timeline work in their favor, no matter what, right up to 2030. If they did nothing, it was, in fact, whenever they interfered, it already compensated for every one of their interferences and still came out with the same result.
But this is strange as well, right?
Yes, well, because it's like self-fulfilling prophecy. When you go into the timeline to change it, you're already projecting yourself into the future in a way. So maybe it's a strange kind of phenomenon that happens with this technology, that it self-corrects itself again, because it's taken into account that you're using the fact that you know something to enter into and change it, whereas if you didn't know it and you just did something randomly different, that would be a different situation.
Yeah,
yeah. So that's how I understand what they're talking about there.
Yeah. So you meet with the Guardians. You talk with them.
Well, with emails we've communicated.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, and you feel it. Your gut feeling says that it's true.
Well, I mean, the way I approach anything like this is, the first reaction I had was, I had these goosebumps, and I felt there was truth happening there. There was something true about it. Yeah. And then, of course, I jumped back, and my mind started thinking, no, that can't be. That's got to be some kind of a gag or some fraud or something. And, I was just going back and forth for days on, what to think of it. And ultimately, and I wrote them, I said, okay, here I am. I'm Frank Jacob. I make films. This is what I do. You can proof it. Here's my credentials. And I'd like to be involved if I can help, because I was thinking if it's true, then I'd like to obviously, bring it out and maybe help to change the timeline. But if it's not true, then I still found that it's too, the events they were describing are too big and life-threatening, to just let it to ignore it, because I thought if I don't write about it and put it into a perspective of timelines, consciousness, higher awareness, then probably somebody else will, and turn it into this whole dark, horror scene, right? And so that's why I decided to publish the story and put it out there. I didn't know anybody else that had published it. I was looking for the usual people that I know, that especially even the people that had broke the original Looking Glass story, but nobody was anywhere near it. So I figured, well, I'm going to do it. So I just put it out there, and I just wanted to see where it goes. I didn't think, honestly, Korina, that it was going to turn into a big dialogue. There were 80 people on their YouTube channel when I first clicked on it, that had watched the videos, and or 70 something.
Sign. I think this is a sign, because like you have a help from the divine, from the universe. You do a little movement, and suddenly becomes something big. It seems like it is something there.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, what happened after I broke the story is far more interesting than the Guardians of the Looking Glass, even, because it's erupted into this global conversation, and you can literally, I'd have to say, that what I did and what my colleague and I in Germany, Dieter Burs, did, can literally take credit for having put it out there, because you could see the numbers of our interviews. The people that had watched our interviews, mine on Inspired and the one I did with him in Germany, and the numbers on their channel, on the Guardians of the Looking channel, were going up in the exact same increments. So it's clearly, as a result of people seeing me talk about it, they went to their site. And more people joined the conversation later, of course. Yeah, after a couple of weeks, it got out there, and then others started to trickle in with their 2 cents on what it was all about. Many people started coming in saying it's absolutely a psyops, and they started to push it into the dark side. And but we, going to your question, do I think it's real? I'm still, I'm not gonna make a decision on whether it's real or not. I'm watching it and I'm reporting. Like a good reporter or a good documentary filmmaker isn't there to make an opinion. He's there to report what is out there, and make it available for people to decide for themselves if it's real. Exactly. But I think the very fact that we're putting it out and talking about it, and that Dieter and then I also in the States, were able to frame it the way it's more responsibly put, so that it's like, hey, people, there is this technology out there. There's others too, like the chronovisor, and there are such things as timelines, and there is one particular timeline right now in the world that's dominant and has the odds in its favor. And that's the one that I call the Transhumanist Timeline, and it's clearly evident all around us. And the other timeline that was described by Bill Wood or whoever, this Enlightenment Timeline, there's very few people talking about it in a large way. I mean, I know small groups meditate and talk about, meditating and having a better world, but having a vision is what it requires. And the World Economic Forum has a vision of what it wants in the world. In fact, it has many visions, around Agenda 21. That all of them are offshoots, and every country has its own compartmentalized version of a whole, a greater whole. But rest assured, they're organized, they have money, they have the media, they have the health organizations in their back pocket, and they're pushing forward with their agenda, much more so than all of us on the alternative crowd that are trying to visualize a new earth, a peaceful place, with higher sensibilities, with enhanced abilities, and a greater sense of our living in harmony with the environment and new energy and all the great inventions that are going to be coming. That needs to be visualized. Someone's got to be doing that. And I think this conversation that we started is putting that out there more than it's ever been.
Yes. And the thing is, when I talk about New Earth in my videos, people say, oh, no, this is a propaganda, they say. And I tell them that it's propaganda if you wait for Q and Trump to save you and to put you in a ready New Earth. But you create it. We have to create it. We have to imagine it first, the same way Tesla was creating his devices. First, he was seeing it in the invisible, in the astral, and then down here. Yes, exactly this is the thing, how we activate people's imagination. Because I think with all that is happening in the world, not only these 3 years, but even before, all the stress and fear, I observe that people they don't have dreams anymore. They don't have their own projects. They don't dream of something. They just go work, eat, sleep, work, eat, sleep. So this way you can't create, right?
Right. Well, that's the thing. We are creator beings, and it's like we've been convinced that we're just drones by the people that are running our society right now. And you can really see how when the whole COVID-19 narrative began spreading around the globe, how the vibe on the planet changed. And just, people, they just became, what's that word, apathetic. They, especially the people who are awake. I think the people who are normies, or whatever you want to call them, integrated into, they're into healthy-minded, integrated in society, which actually turned on its head. They're really not healthy because society is not healthy. But those people probably, they had a hard time with the material things, that they couldn't go shopping, they couldn't go to the movies or to the discos or whatever they want. Their freedoms were limited. But those people that were the really creative people in the awakening, in the awakened communities, those, I think, took the hardest hit, because they just saw, how this draconian energy descended on the planet and gave us this limited perspective on things that many of us know are just not true.
Yeah.
And it was depressing to watch how everybody in the world embraced this without thinking, instantly, like within 2 or 3 weeks, hundreds of countries, all of them just, went along with it and said, okay, well, I guess we have to all do the same thing.
Yeah.
And it put us into, another thing is it put us into is fear mode. And when you're in fear mode because you're afraid of, and this is the fear mode, the enemy that they chose this time around was genius. How better than to have an invisible foe lurking behind every potential little corner that could jump out at you and infect you? And
Frank, it's easy if people research a little bit, they will find out that never in human history virus existed. So it's just to research 2-3 days. To find out about this.
right? But most people believe the germ theory, you know, and so I mean, they always forget that it's called the germ theory. They just, and just like the theory of evolution, you know, and there's other theories out there, right? And they're not proven. They're just a theory. Someone has some ideas, and but the thing is that's funny is that it's true. They've never actually been able to isolate a virus ever. I mean, there's people that have put rewards out for, you know, show me a virus and I'll pay you $1 million. You know, it's like nobody can, you know, because they don't exist. A virus, what they're describing as viruses, and I'm not a scientist and a biologist here, but I did spend a few years in the health sector working on natural healing and informing myself about vaccines and, you know, body chemistry. And what you realize is that, you know, there are people that have photographed blood using dark field microscopes where they don't have to kill the blood samples or the tissues and magnify them huge, which is what they do to get their idea of what a virus is. But they're actually using microscopes that are able to see that how the cell actually works, and that viruses, what people call viruses, may actually be, you know, some people call them microzymas, for example. They're like the cell expels toxins when it's trying to clean itself. But we don't have that model of healing in society, that sickness is a process of eliminating toxins. We just think that sickness is something on the outside which has grabbed us and has attacked our body, and now we're in defensive mode, right? So we pump ourselves full of, you know, vitamins and whatever we can to prevent it, you know, medicines. But we don't stop to think, you know, maybe there was a cause to the illness, and so that's the main problem. And I think the new Earth that we're aspiring to get to has a complete understanding of health in that greater holistic sense, whereas the old timeline, or the one we're on now, is using a sledgehammer to enforce this draconian idea of, you know, there's these outside elements that, you know, attack your body just like an army, you know, and just, you know, enters in and destroys your system. You know, so it's oversimplified, and a lot of people, they don't have the time, you know, to study about disease, or, you know, they learned in school essential basics about how things work, so they never question those things. And if the people out there, the government and their schools and the teachers and universities, aren't enforcing this other idea, you know, because maybe they're paid by pharmaceutical corporations, or maybe the Rockefellers own a lot of the universities and made sure that the curriculum covered material only they wanted to put out there. But if they didn't think about that, then they would actually believe that what we're being told by our leaders and by our health officials is true.
Yeah, yeah. I even had an interview with Dr. Young. You know about Dr. Young?
Yes.
He talks a lot about that that virus don't exist and all that kind of things. I even had an interview about that. And no, nobody in Greece could believe that. Not even doctors that are now talking about they say to people, don't take the jab, you know, but they think me and Dr. Young, that we are crazy.
Of course.
You know? So it's difficult. It's difficult to get that truth out there. And okay, you take it out there, but it's difficult for people to understand it and believe it. And that's thing. And even if the guardians of looking glass are psyops, for me it's okay, because look what happened with Q as well. Maybe Q were psyops because nothing happened at the end, right? But how many people were helped to see the truth?
Yes, but the problem with Q is that at the end, when Q kind of shriveled up and disappeared and left all of the Anons, you know, kind of like hanging, wondering, oh, now what? Was this really? It actually has the pendulum swings back, you know, and it's like now the people that were open, a lot of them, when it didn't go the way they wanted to, are even more cynical than they were before. Really? Just like when 2012 happened, you know, 2012 came and went, and so many spiritual people I know, they were so bummed out after the big awakening never happened on the 21st of December, that you could sense the spiritual community kind of went silent for a few years, you know, kind of trying to find itself again. And the danger with anything like Q or like a Trump, who's the savior, is that when the savior doesn't deliver, then everyone is, what happened is that the pendulum swings back the other way, as is a law of nature in a way. And the people, become really jaded, and not only that, but the people that had been pushed out by the Trump administration, when they got back into power, the agendas that everyone was afraid that they were going to be putting through, before Trump got elected, they're now coming back in light speed. I mean, they've made leaps and bounds with the policies that they were trying to implement 4 years earlier, and they were cut off because the Trump administration, yeah? But you could still say that in the background, there really isn't one government head. There's only the appearance of a government. And then really there's other levels where it doesn't matter who's at the head of a stupid government. There are powerful people that are playing the government officials like puppets. Yeah. So even Trump has a leash. He's never going to be able to go out there and bark as loud and run down the street. He's got his leash. He's going to be pulled back, or he's going to be assassinated, or whatever it is. So I think that there's been a modeling of society that's been developing for well over 100 years. And Trump was a part of the model. You could almost say that it was needed because they do these things called think tank studies, where they begin to feel out whether people in society if there's a resistance to the policies that they're trying to push through, and where that resistance might be coming from. And when they sense there's a threshold where it's getting to the point where a critical mass of people might backfire on what they're doing, they will provide their own solution. And I believe Trump, I know people are going to probably hate me for saying this, but Trump, you have to be open to the idea that Trump was also controlled opposition, that they put him in place because they knew if they didn't put a Trump in and satisfy these loud screaming voices saying, we want to change, it's unfair, and then they would have had it would have been probably some form of a revolution brewing, and it might have gotten really violent, and then it would have thrown all their plans off. Because if you take 250 or 300 million Americans and put guns in their hands and they start fighting it, even if you're a deep state, you can forget your plans. They're going to go back in the drawers until the dust settles. But they don't want that. They still want to control it. They have their agenda, and they know because they've worked with Looking Glass where it's going, and they know as long as they can tamp down any resistance, then they'll do it. It's written right into the Art of War by Lao Tzu. It's if you want to beat the opposition, you be the opposition. Exactly. And so why wouldn't they put their own opposition? Just like they put people into the ufology field. When they know that it's getting too hot, people are talking about real events, they put in some crazies. And the crazies bring in wrong information or twist the truth or half the truth.
Exactly.
Right? And that's where it comes back to that circle of where I said Bill Wood, half truth, right? So you feed them some stuff, give them hope, right? All the people that I played that video to, I was just as much as a sucker when I saw it. Like, oh, look at this. It's over, right? But it wasn't. So it took the heat off of them. They could continue doing their thing. Everyone thought, hey, it's okay. We just got to sit back and eat the popcorn, and the world order is going to be disintegrated, and we're going to rise up to be these superhumans. There's even a TV show about it, called Heroes, So they give us our television shows, and they give us our popcorn and our sci-fi movies, and we live our fantasies into their steered version of reality.
Hypnotized. Yes, exactly. Yes.
I know it sounds really hard and maybe even cynical, but I think for us to wake up, we have to be able to look at that dark stuff really and not get caught in it and realize that there's multi-levels of a game going on here. And even the Guardians of the Looking Glass might be part of a game. And the new, the new info or the new, people, the new awakening people out there, like the light, what I call them, light activists. I don't like to call them light warriors because that's bringing in war, Yes. They're activists, activating. And so the light activists, the new light activists have to be able to look at all this dark stuff and not get caught up by whether it's good or bad or whatever, but just if there is 50% truth, take the good part, use your discernment and your stomach and your heart, and and then you'll know which way to go. And as long as you're not too hung up on it going one way or the other, it's not a problem.
And again, we don't have to lose something if we just share their videos and take the word out.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I felt the same as you when I first saw their videos, goosebumps, and I was screaming here to my roommate, oh my God, because I had this from 2015 in one of my channelings that we are at the bad timeline and we have to go to the optimal timeline. And that's the reason that I started to search about the Q stuff, because in their maps, they write also optimal timeline. They have this written there. So
well, they put the looking glass into some of the Q messages, so the Guardians, I mean, not Guardians, but just the Project Looking Glass was inserted into Q. And, that's where a lot of people heard of it. And when I brought the information to Inspired, a lot of the people were fired up because they'd heard about it through Q, because a lot of those Q people are still out there, yes. And so we have to, so the thing is, we just can't get caught up in the semantics of it. But the thing is that the timeline issue is something a lot of people identify with. It's easy to understand, because we have been watching some of these movies, and if we've got a filter on of healthy skepticism, then we will watch those films as if they're a form of soft disclosure, telling us the technology they already have, telling us where they really want to go, and then we can, so that we don't feed them our energy in terms of being in awe and just falling into the storyline, but instead looking at it as, thank you for that information. Now I know what you want, what you've got planned.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we must do is to raise our vibration and our consciousness, because then we can have the right intuition, and when our intuition is our heart's at the right place, and intuition works for us, then we can realize if this is truth or not, and or to hear Trump, to go with Trump or not, and what to do after that. I think this is important. I wanted to ask something about the sun. Because you had this, when I was seeing the Solar Revolution, your film, I had this question in my mind. Because, we say that particles from the sun will activate the people. But if you read, because you were at Natural Healing, and for sure about Reich.
Yes.
Reich, his machines and everything. He's saying in his books that the sun has door energy, DOR, death energy, deadly energy, and it's not good for people to go outside and do sun bath, and I have a video on my channel. I found some information about the sun. Some people have taken photographs of sun, and in the middle there is a black dot always in these photographs of sun. So I researched a lot of that thing, and I found out that there is a hexagon machine that hides the sun now. They have put, you have seen that China wants to make a simulation of the sun, and it looks like hexagon. But before China announced that, already there were videos where they saw this hexagon machine over the sun. So what do you think is going on with the sun and this machine? Maybe if you have heard about that. And what about this door energy that Raif was saying?
Well, I mean, I was very interested in you're talking about Wilhelm Reich, right?
Yeah.
I was interested in his work, and then I came across some material that made me wonder if Reich is really legit anymore. So I'm not sure. I'm at this point, I'm not going to have an opinion about Reich. What I can say about this idea that we get energy from the sun, yes, the sun in a certain sense is like a being. It's like if we look at, it depends what your belief is. Do you believe that we're just, rocks and molecules and atoms and, consciousness is an accident? Or do you believe the universe in itself, as we're learning in quantum physics, is an actual is like a being in itself, and that the planets are actual beings, and the sun is like a celestial being, which is giving us certain energies, certain cosmic energies, which we need as human beings, particular to our solar system. But in solar revolution, we were talking about energy that wasn't coming necessarily from the sun. I mean, yes, there are particles coming from the sun, but what's happening is that we're getting particles and X-rays and gamma rays and frequencies coming at us from the center of our galaxy. So those are something that are independent of the sun, and those are actually affecting the sun itself, to the point where, in fact, all the planets in our whole solar system have gotten warmer. Like there's this global warming happening, but through the entire solar system. So, you know, I mean, you can tell that to Greta Thunberg, you know, all those bad carbon emissions that we're having with our cars are affecting Mars and Jupiter and Venus and all the planets, amazingly, right? So it has to do with this greater model of what's happening with us right now in a particular place that we're traveling in the galaxy, that we are actually in a place where we're getting exposed to these particles and frequencies, which has probably never happened. And these are informing us with information coming from that center of our galaxy. And it's adding to what the sun was always doing, and whatever that connection was between us and the sun. I don't know about sun gazing. I don't do it. I know people that do it. I think these are things that we each have to, if you're meant to sun gaze, you'll find information about it and you'll try it. And it'll either work for you or it won't work for you. And it has to do if you feel like you're lacking something or if you're unhealthy. I think in general what's happening is most people are not going outside enough, period. These days in the Western society, most people sit in front of a computer all day, get into a car with a roof, unless you're living in California, of course, and then you drive, home and get into a house and sit under a roof there. And if you're lucky enough to have a garden, so people are not going outside as much as they used to in the medieval days, where you were outside most of the time. Yeah. And when you're outside, you're exposed to the sun. You're exposed to the perfect amount of dosage, which creates the perfect amount of vitamin D in your system, which boosts your immune system. And because we're not getting that, our bodies are becoming deficient of vitamin D, making us more prone to increase in imbalance in our bodies, making it seem then like we're getting sick and so things like that. So the sun plays an important role in strengthening our immune system, and it plays an important role in some kind of an ancient cosmic connection that we have on a soul level with that celestial being that's at the center of our solar system.
Mm-hmm. What you found out about Wilhelm Reich, and you think that maybe he was not legit? It was very, I didn't have in mind to do this question, but because you said that, I am like, wow,
I'd have to go back through my notes. It's at the top of my head. I don't want to just blurt anything out and be wrong about it. I'd rather be very accurate about what I say. Okay, but I remember there was a certain point where I came across some information and I went, and it made sense. But we can follow up on that question maybe in the future.
Sure. Of course. Okay. And I wanted to ask also about their own job, that the guardians of looking glass say that the elite will make a specific job for them.
Yes.
Will help them to become even more of higher consciousness beings, But how a being of higher consciousness will be able to continue doing this kind of things?
Well, because what they're hoping will happen is that if we talk a little bit about what's written into one of the videos, is that they're going to there's going to be this cosmic event in 2030, and the cosmic event is going to trigger us. It's going to be something which is going to push us to this other quantum leap level that there's been prophecies about. The Maya have talked about it, and the Hopi have talked about it, and the Dogon have talked about it. I mean, there's been many cultures that have this kind of built-in legend that there's going to be some cosmic event which is going to push us to this other level. And before that happens, I think the people that are in charge of the looking glass technology, or they're trying to control the technology in their favor and not in our favor, they essentially want to. They know when this event happens that this will have this kind of enlightenment, and that it'll basically erase, in a way, it'll erase what was before. And they, want to just reach that place where all this other stuff out there is erased, including memory even, maybe. And they just come awake in this new dimension. Maybe even
their karma.
Right, karma, everything, right? Because karma is really only there because it's something there to teach you of something that it's there to teach you something. I totally agree,
yes.
So if you have learned, or if you've seen it, like the people that have taken part in Rick Strassman's, you remember that section of Solar Revolution where the experiment was done with dimethyltryptamine? Because dimethyltryptamine is one of the chemicals that our pineal gland puts into our brain to put us into an altered state of consciousness.
Yes, yes.
Right? So essentially, they saw that you reach this other level altogether, and it's in another dimension, really. And so I think that they were kind of hoping to eliminate what they saw as a mass amount of useless people out there. And if you listen to Yuval Harari's talks in front of the World Economics Forum, it used to be a conspiracy theory that, the useless eaters and the protocols of the wise men of Zion, this Jewish conspiracy that they're going to inherit the earth.
Yes, yes.
Right, exactly. And it's like now Harari's right there in the open saying, the people out there are useless eaters. He even uses that expression.
Yeah.
And so they really do look at the majority of people. I mean, he frames it very pragmatically. Look, there's these people out there. They don't have work. They don't have need. We don't have a need for them, so they're useless, and they need to eat. So he just looks at it as very pragmatic, even though it sounds very, it sounds diabolical. Yeah. But that's how they see it. They look at the rest of the population as unneeded, and that when this evolutionary leap happens, why not use that to clean house, get rid of them all and have a beautiful planet with only 500 or a million of us, a million people, a million of the elites, yes. and 500 million kind of slaves, yes. Dummies that are sort of lurching around and like human robots to do their bidding, while they have these superpowers, and are eternally youthful, and so I think that's kind of their vision, and that's what they're trying to achieve with their version of a vaccination program.
Yeah, I understand the reason and what they want to achieve, but I think it's not normal, even if they do it, if they manage to do everything of that in 2030, when they take all these particles from the sun and they are then in higher consciousness, they won't be able to continue doing that, to have the slaves, because the higher consciousness is love, is different.
Well, they might just wake up and go, oh, we have all these people around. Okay, let's put them to work. We'll give them something with dignity, that they can live their lives. And they'll of course try to treat them. They'll treat them well because there's only 500 million. The whole planet is available, right? So,
yeah.
I think that the world will be a beautiful one in both scenarios. But the problem is, it's not fair because it's our inheritance, all of us, to be able to experience that, and the universe in itself living through us has the need to make that transition with us as well. And so if it's a very controlled way of doing it, then it's really like it's unfair, and it'll have to go through another cycle all over again unnecessarily.
Yes.
But I mean, it depends where you look at it. You could also look at it as a soul agreement. We came here and that's what we agreed to on some level. I don't know, but the thing is, we have to be aware of the two timelines, that these two consensus timelines that I was saying earlier. One of them is leading us to this transhumanist existence. And then at some point, I guess, the transhumanists, I mean, what's interesting is that it makes you wonder about machine beings, how they will make a transition into this other new era, right? Are they going to be brought along on that level? Are they just going to be relegated to being machines and or all destroyed? I mean, or is it just a safe, mechanism that certain people in the deep state or certain inventors like Kurzweil and Harari and these guys, they want to make sure that they're hedging their bets. If the thing doesn't happen in 2030, we want to be immortal, and if it does happen, we're going to be immortal.
Yeah. But yes, I think in a way that machine beings can't be connected with the consciousness, maybe. So
right.
Yeah, and I heard you talking in a video about about some aliens, 45 and the other
P-52s and P-45s.
Yes, talk to us about that.
In the 40s, the American and over America, there was a series of UFO crashes that started to happen, and they recovered the bodies and the pilots of these craft, and they recovered the craft. In some cases, they recovered working models, and that's how America got their hands on some very advanced technology. But what they had on their hands was kind of a problem, in that they had to decide whether or not to publish this information to the public or to keep it quiet. And they did a series of studies, and in 1960 they had something called the Brookings Report, and they decided that it would be too dangerous to release the information about the existence of extraterrestrials or other extraterrestrial life forms in the universe to the masses. And in the meantime, they'd been, they'd had these captive beings, and these beings, they gave them a name, and the name was J-Rod. And they found out, to their shock, that these beings were not necessarily extraterrestrials, because they looked like those little grays with the buggy eyes, and that they weren't necessarily extraterrestrials in the sense that they came from another planet and were here for the very first time. What they found out was that these beings were our descendants, that they were humans that had left our planet and went into the cosmos and were, the P-45s were 45,000 years in our future. And the P-52s, which was a second type that came back using the looking glass technology, by the way, which they had installed on their ships, which is why they found out about that's why Project Looking Glass got started in the first place.
Traveled with looking glass technology?
They traveled. You can use the looking glass device to travel as well. Okay. And they've had these devices on some of the ships, and the aliens coming back, the future humans from 52,000 years in our future, were here to try and help us because of some major event that stands right at our doorstep now, that is about to happen.
Yeah.
And the document, there was a briefing document that describes essentially the history of the organization that was formed to deal with this problem, called Majestic. So that if you were ever hired by this core team of 12 to come and work on one of the projects that they had with respect to what they were finding with the crashed, like Bob Lazar worked on some technology, you remember him probably, and others that were brought in, and Dan Burish was one of them. He was a microbiologist brought in to help deal with the biology problem with respect to the J-rods. And it was through decades of communication with these J-rods that were captive that they found out about the looking glass, and they found out about this impending event that's going to happen. And the the P-45 future humans, they were not here to help us. Actually, they wanted the timeline to stay the way it went. So it's interesting because you have that same parallel. You have one group of humans, of course, deformed looking now, 50,000 years in the future, basically. They've mutated because of what happened on Earth 45,000 years in their past, which is our now. And so they wanted it to be the way it is because they were just here to harvest certain genetic materials and take it back to their timeline. And they did not want the timeline to change. In fact, they were preventing those people who were trying to change the timeline from changing it. Sound familiar, right?
Wingmakers material from Dr. Neruda, Wingmakers.
The Wingmakers?
Wingmakers, yes.
I've heard of the Wingmakers, and their material is very interesting.
I can send you some material that I have about that. They say that the Greys are coming back to take genetic materials in order to manage to have souls again.
Yeah.
So I wonder why they want this timeline to be the bad one.
Because they believe they can get to that, they can get that, what they're looking for, and take it back to where they are, because they obviously have some kind of a societal structure that suits their needs in the future. And so the P-52s, they were not into it. In fact, they're trying to work against them and work with a certain fraction of our government on the inside to provide them with the means to work against the P-45s. And so what comes out of the P-45, P-52 story is that there is a timeline war going on. There still is. And what the Guardians of the Looking Glass are describing is nothing, for me, nothing other than exactly that same scenario framed 45,000 years in their past.
Yeah.
And they're here now, again, because they maybe saw that there was some threat to their timeline. It's like it's this very interesting, theme that keeps appearing again and again, that there's like a group that wants their timeline and another group that's trying to push for this organic timeline, this evolutionary timeline where it's, we just have this major evolution. And then if the event happens, whenever, if it's 2030 or even shortly thereafter, whatever, it doesn't matter. But when the event happens, we're prepared for it, and we've actually learned from the communication with these P-52s that if we raise our consciousness to a high enough level, even the cosmic events that hit us, if it's a micronova or a super flare, mega flare, is actually just going to pass us by. And it won't affect us on that same level. And so we will not be pushed back into the Stone Age and wiped out necessarily if we have this ability to make that conscious leap.
Yes. Yes, I think this is all about this spiritual warfare, and we have to continue raising our consciousness. And this whole thing reminds me of Dolores Cannon.
Everyone keeps mentioning Dolores Cannon. Yeah. Didn't she? But is that the one that just now stepped back and became totally born again Christian and renounces all of her work, or is that somebody else I'm mixing her up?
Oh no, this is other one. The one that you say is still alive. Yes, it's other her name.
But it's not Dolores Cannon.
No, Dolores Cannon is dead, and Dolores Cannon is the one who was doing hypnosis to thousands of people, and that people started to say the same thing all over, that they came to help Earth for the shift, and I think that's how it started. Maybe to hear about New Earth, and I think Dolores Cannon with this hypnosis thing, thousands of people were saying that, and she was saying.
Well, it's a great confirmation. I mean, I need to brush up on Dolores. Maybe I've actually read some of her stuff years ago, but I've read so much that some of the stuff I've already forgotten more than most people.
I can send you something about that, yes, because she was talking about the volunteers, about 3 waves of volunteers that are coming on Earth.
So it's not Barbara Marciniak. I've read her material. That's very interesting as well, because that's also talking about this time and awakening, a group of people that are here to awaken.
Yeah, I think Barbara was the one who was channeling Pleiadians.
Pleiadians.
Yes. Yeah. But there was another lady who was very well known, who gave up with everything about all this kind of
Marianne something, or
I can't remember her name either right now. But
doesn't matter anyway. It's not Dolores Cannon, so
yeah, I know what you mean. Yes. Okay. So what about the codes that they have in their videos, the Guardians of the Looking Glass? Have you searched about that? What about the amulet and?
Well, I have to be honest that I'm not a code cracker in that sense of a traditional, like, there are people that can figure out codes and text, they can mathematically work it out. And, part of me in the back of my mind is thinking that the code thing was put in there as a decoy to throw off certain people. and not necessarily that there really are codes in it. And in either case, I mean, for me, whether there's codes in it or not is, it doesn't change anything about what I'm doing, and
Yes.
I mean, I think that, there are those who are going to crack a code if the codes are really in there and they have their particular assignment. And then there's other people like myself that must have been seen, as having a different role, that came in, and my role isn't necessarily to crack a code. My role was to, whatever, get it out there and start talking about what we're talking about, which led to us sitting here right now talking.
Yes.
So I don't know about the codes. And the amulet's interesting too, because the amulet seems to be some kind of a device that has to be activated. Because if you read the text, it says they need to find this thing which has been lost for 300 years, and then it needs to be activated to counteract the effect of the CERN manipulation of the timelines. So, but my resignation with respect to amulets is always that an amulet is always only going to be as powerful as the energy that we give it, because we are above all amulets and all material things. We're creator beings that, an amulet will only be powerful if we've given it the power.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Yes. Yes.
So it may be dangerous to put invest any interest in giving an amulet power. It's like, or if we don't find it, we're doomed. Because you're setting yourself up for it, right? So I would just say it's an interesting twist that the thing is taken in another direction. I'm not sure it's not a decoy. And I'm very curious to see what the next video is going to be, because we've really kind of pushed their game, as I say.
Yes.
They're having to really, there's now over hundreds of thousands of people that have watched those videos. So, and there are a lot of skeptics, so they're now, they've entered another league, with the way this thing has exploded because of what I was doing and what Dieter was doing. Yes. I mean, whether it was going to happen anyway, I don't know, because obviously that's not a timeline that we're on. Because see, this timeline that we've created is one where, we didn't know it was going to go this way. Like I told you, I only did the article because I thought it was an interesting story. I didn't think it was going to mushroom explode. But the fact that, and that's probably why we've changed the timeline. All of these people are tuned in together on these interviews and have started this dialogue. We actually actively changed the timeline.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to change the timeline. It's through good intention, through positive thinking, positive visualization, that you change it. You can't change. It's not necessarily going to work if you know what's going to happen in the future, and then you try to go in and make sure that doesn't happen. It's not certain that it's going to work out for you. There, in that case, I think there are factors that get in the way. This, what they call the doctrine of Convergent Timeline paradox, which is another thing that came out of the discussions with the J-Rods over several decades.
Yes. Yeah, I think the power of the attention is a great thing. And not only that, there was a document from CIA that was not released. But I had a friend in America. I had this in Greek because I had translated it, and I have it in video in Greek. But I don't know in which of my laptops. I think it's in an old laptop in the island, the original one. So a friend of mine who is in America has found this secret report from CIA, and it was about internal living. Biological, how it's called in English, when you don't die.
Biogenics or?
Biological, internal life, something like that, to not die biologically. And it was talking about the genome project there, but all the rest was about how humans create the doomsday. Create all I saw there that it was not a released document. It was a secret document. It's still a secret document. How they are sure about us that we create our future. So they say to us events that they want to happen. You know what I mean? If they talk to you about a catastrophe, it's going to happen. the self-fulfilling
self-fulfilling prophecy.
They write it there. I was amazed because CIA was writing there again and again and again and again about that things, and was saying that humans have some kind of implants that have stopped immortality. That was the right word. Biological immortality was about the title of this document. So it was saying that this, not exactly implants, was another word, but we can turn them off only with our minds. And you know what I have channeled in my book gives me the information that we have maybe one strand of DNA more than them. So maybe that's why they're so scared if we take this sun activation. I don't know. I feel something like that, you know. And I think that we are the power. We are more powerful somehow. With our mind, with our soul, with our consciousness, we are more powerful. And if we focus at the positive outcome, it will come.
Yes. I mean, we're only using, you know, between 7 and 10% of our brains, some people less.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously there's room for, you know, expansion. You know, there's lots of, you know, and you know, we don't live in a state of full consciousness right now. We have the waking conscious, the sleeping conscious, and the subconscious, or the unconscious. And you know, when people have had near-death experiences return, they often report about having, you know, visions into many more layers of dimensionality than we are perceiving in the world now in our half sleeping state. We're kind of really walking, you know, in a half sleep state, because half of our, or more than half of our lives are, you know, really like, well, you could probably say, you know, a little bit more than half our lives are where we're kind of half awake, you know, in the sense that we're not, you know, using our full brain. And the rest of the time, which is almost half, we're totally gone. We're sleeping, you know. And those of us who have dreams, you know, we have dream experiences, but most of them don't really translate into the waking consciousness. Only a few people have that ability to, you know, to transgress the boundaries of sleep and waking consciousness and bring back information like Bob Monroe was doing at the Monroe Institute.
Yes, yes.
You know, and like Tom Campbell, you know, talks about, he's one of the people that had the ability to make that venture into those other dimensions. And there are people that can do that, but that's more the exception. But those are people who are tapping into those other areas of our brain, or let's say our DNA, because our DNA apparently is not just 2-strand but 12-strand. So there's going to be 10 more strands of DNA which are now considered maybe junk DNA, which are not junk, which are actually contain the keys and will unlock these abilities. And maybe it needed for us to get to a certain point in the cosmos where we've matured mentally enough and technologically enough and experientially enough so that when this moment comes, we're prepared for it and we don't panic.
Yeah.
And so I think what the other side is afraid of is that, you know, we all have that awakening awareness, and they lose complete control. And not only that, but they're probably afraid of the repercussions. They're afraid of when people wake up and see that they've been lied to for all these years, you know, for decades, and that they've been manipulated, and they've been, you know, all the pain and the wars, needless, you know, wars and suffering that we've had to go through, all because this clique has been trying to steer and dominate their particular limited view of a timeline. You know, so these people are really not getting it. You know, and the problem is that they're dangerous because they're getting the technology, and, you know, they've made materialism their god. And so, you know, and they help each other along on the material level. So they have better cars, better suits, better homes, better vacations, you know, everything's better materially than we have, but they are completely locked out of that particular part of their belief. that particular, maybe they're soulless, or maybe they've sold their souls. A lot of them are Satanists, and have sworn allegiance to secret societies, even their families, and given themselves to some higher other guy or force that's going to be here to they're delusional in that sense, but they're all collectively delusional, and they're very dangerous because their delusion right now has so much control over the way the planet runs. They've got control of the financial system. They've got control of the media. They've got control of the technology which we use every day, like transportation and communications and all these things, and that's what gives them an edge over us that are essentially have to rely on what we do have, and that's just our bodies and our brains and our creativity.
Yes. And I think it's not really the brain that has the power, but consciousness, because I tried...
True. Consciousness doesn't reside in the brain, actually.
Yes, because I was trained with Tom Campbell, and I have contact with him. I love him. He's love, and I have been trained also for a lot of things like telekinesis, etc., with the other way.
I saw that video. That was amazing what you did.
So I have tried both methods, with the brain way, the technical way, to imagine lights and to imagine Kundalini and things like that. And I tried the other way. And I am very lucky because I tried first the Tom Campbell's way, to get out of body and try it from the being level. So yes, for me, the real thing is the one with the being level. And if you have seen the little kids that can see without eyes, when they put a mask on them, so we don't see with our eyes, we don't think with our brain, it's our consciousness.
We had a guest on one of our shows, Timeless, that had done an experiment where they put children in blindfold, and they were riding their bikes around in obstacle courses and not colliding with anything.
Exactly. So it's not the eyes, it's not the brain, it's
Exactly, but I just mean like we use our brain as a machine, like our bodies as a machine to house our consciousness. And it is what we've chosen to put ourselves into right now in order to have certain experiences. And, the problem is that the people that are worshiping the body, they've gotten obsessed with the body and materialism, as opposed to seeing the body simple as a vehicle that houses our higher consciousness. And that our consciousness connects to other dimensions and actually, just makes use of this dimension for the purpose of steering and manipulating our own little puppet body.
Yeah. And maybe we have not chosen it, Frank, right? Maybe you will read my book, right? Because there it gives what they told me when I channeled it, that is the real story of Earth, of planet Earth. And it's not that it doesn't show that we have really chosen it.
The book that writes itself, that one?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got it, and thank you so much for sending it. I've been so bogged down because I'm getting a webinar ready. Yeah. I opened my mouth.
Video. I see all your videos now. I watch all your videos. Yes. So yes, I'm going to be at the webinar, and
so I'm finishing it. I've set up a whole platform. I've been so busy. It's just been working day and night. And when that's done and I'm finished, then I have to record the seminar. That's the next thing. I've been piecing together all the elements to it, but I have to kind of record it, and then I have to publish it. And then when it's done and everyone can explore it and experience it, then I have more time. And then I'm going to get into...
So you don't know yet when the webinar will be?
Yeah, I mean, my projected release date is May 20, but I haven't announced it yet. So I'm going to make an official announcement. But
May 20.
This is off the radar. I mean, that's my wish date. My wish date, but don't commit to it. Until you get it. I'm going to send everyone an email. That everyone has sent me emails that wants to take part, and I've got hundreds of emails, and I'm going to send them out. And I'll tell exactly when it's going to start and how you can...
Okay, great. And if you want to say your webpage for my audience... So...
Yeah, you can go to the best page right now is frankjacob.com. And there you can, with, Frank with a K and Jacob with a C.
I will write it here.
And you can send, there's a contact form at the bottom of that page. You can send me a message if you want to partake in the seminar, and then I will add you to my mailing list, and then you'll get the message from me in a few days. And yeah, that's probably the best place to start.
Okay.
If you want to see our films, you would go to screenaddiction.com. You can put that link too.
I saw it from your webpage. From your webpage,
you got to it from the webpage? Yeah, because I did put links there too, because people were asking.
Amazon was not working for Greek people.
Yeah.
Yes, we couldn't buy it.
You'd have to buy it at Amazon.com in America and then have it shipped.
Okay.
But I don't know how reliable it is. I've sent things to Greece.
I saw them from Real House because I went to your webpage, and from there I clicked. I will put all the links under the video anyway. Yes.
That'll be easiest for people. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was great. And I hope you will have more time to repeat this, to have next part.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll find some time. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and to talk to you, and amazing work you do. Wonderful what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You too. Thank you. So, guys, let's all get registered on this webinar. It will be amazing, I think. Frank has so much knowledge. He has done so big research. So email him and let's get on this webinar all together. Okay. So take care and love you all. Bye.